It started with a splash, not a dramatic one, not a party, just the soft sound of water moving in my own backyard, under my own lights, on my own property, late at night when the neighborhood was quiet and the stars were out. I was in my pool, easing into the hot tub, phone on the side, stress finally slipping off my shoulders after a long week, and then I saw the red and blue lights flashing through the trees. At first, I thought someone else was in trouble, maybe a medical call, maybe a traffic stop down the block. I leaned back, letting the jets hit my lower back, when a voice echoed over the fence. "Sir, can you come out here for a moment?" That's when it hit me. The police were here for me, for sitting in my own pool at night. Welcome to America. Welcome to an HOA. And welcome to the moment my neighbor officially made me her personal project. This is Story Vault Hub, and if you've ever lived in a neighborhood where one person decides they're the main character and everyone else is just background noise, you already know where this is going. The officer was polite, embarrassed honestly. He explained that a complaint had been made about suspicious activity involving my backyard, lights and water after dark. I stood there dripping wet, towel around my waist, pointing at my fence, my house, my deed. The officer nodded, apologized, and left. No warning, no citation. Nothing illegal had happened, but from the other side of the fence, I could feel her watching. Her husband, by the way, is a decent guy, friendly. Ways when he sees me. We've talked about sports, grills, weather, normal suburban stuff, but his wife, she used to be president of the PTA until the entire school community practically united to vote her out. Too controlling, too aggressive, too loud, too convinced that authority was her birthright. When she lost that power, she didn't change. She just needed a new stage. Aapko Shambe Side-eye looks. Notes that mysteriously appeared in my mailbox about community standards. Comments to other neighbors about how some people didn't respect the rules. I ignored it. People like that feed on reactions. Then the police call started. One night, pool usage. Another time, the hot tub. Once, because my backyard lights were too bright, even though they were installed by the previous owner and approved by the HOA years earlier. Every time, the cops showed up, apologized and left. Every time, I documented it. And somewhere around the third police visit, I realized something important. She wasn't trying to win, she was trying to provoke. She wanted me angry, defensive, explosive. She wanted a villain to justify her obsession. So I decided to give her something else entirely. I decided to become the most aggressively rule-compliant homeowner this HOA had ever seen. I printed out the HOA bylaws, all of them, every footnote. I highlighted, I measured, I timed things down to the minute. If the rules said trash cans could go out after 6 p.m., mine went out at 6:01. If holiday decorations were allowed, starting December 1st, my lights turned on at midnight, December 1st sharp. If lawn height had a maximum, I mowed until it was exactly that height, not a blade shorter. I wasn't breaking rules, I was worshipping them, and it drove her insane. I installed a small, tasteful sign near my gate. Smile, you're on camera. Cameras were allowed, signs were allowed. The cameras pointed only at my own property. Completely legal, completely harmless, completely devastating to someone who lives, to report others. I waved every time I saw her. Big smile, friendly tone, good evening. Beautiful day, isn't it? I did it in front of other neighbors. I did it when she was clearly in a bad mood. I did it when she pretended not to hear me. She stopped, waving back, then came the decorations. Nothing offensive, nothing vulgar. Just inspirational quotes in neutral colors. Live and let live, peace begins at home. A small garden placed perfectly within HOA guidelines, facing outward, permanently smiling in her direction. Wind chimes that met every decibel requirement, but never fully stopped singing. She complained. Of course, she did, and the Ahad Shavi told her everything was compliant. That's when the email started. Not from her. From the Acha Pollock chickens. Confirmations that my property was in good standing. Gentle reminders sent to everyone about proper use of emergency services. She had officially become a problem resident. I didn't escalate. I didn't argue. I documented every police call, every O response. Professional language, no emotion. Just facts. Meanwhile, I started hosting small gatherings, quiet, approved. Friends sitting by the pool talking softly, laughing, enjoying life within every posted rule. Nothing enrages a control freak more than watching people be happy without permission. Her husband started looking tired. He stopped chatting over the fence. He stopped grilling outside when she was home. One night, I overheard raised voices through the open windows. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. Power struggles don't stay contained, and the funniest part, I never once confronted her, I never accused, never yelled, never complained. I let the rules do the talking, because in an HOA, the cleanest revenge isn't chaos. It's compliance so precise it feels personal. And this was only the beginning. The funny thing about power-hungry people is that once they realize they're losing control, they don't back off. They spiral, and that spiral is loud, messy, and very well documented if you're patient enough to let it happen. After the HOA confirmed, again, that I was fully compliant, her behavior shifted. She stopped pretending it was about rules. It became about presence, about watching, about timing. I'd step into my backyard and feel eyes on me before I ever heard a sound. Curtains would move, doors would open and close for no reason. She started pacing her yard when I was outside, phone in hand, like she was waiting for me to slip up. I didn't. I leaned into the calm. I leaned into the normal. I leaned into the kind of behavior that makes unstable people feel invisible. One evening, just before quiet hours, I turned on soft spa music. Nothing loud. No bass, just ambient water and light instrumental sounds. Completely allowed, I eased into the hot tub, steam rising into the cool night air, lights set to the approved brightness level. 10 minutes before quiet hours hit, the music shut off automatically. Silence, just water and night sounds. That's when the police showed up again. Same officers as before, same awkward look. This time they didn't even ask me to step out. They stood by the gate and explained gently that they'd received another complaint. Noise, disturbance. I gestured toward the silence. One of them sighed. The other nodded. They left without knocking on my neighbor's door, but the message was clear. She was burning credibility fast. The AHA sent out a community-wide email the next day about misuse of emergency services and the importance of resolving concerns through proper channels. No names mentioned, no accusations, but everyone knew. At Story Vault Hub, we talk a lot about quiet wins. This was one of them. Around this time, I installed a small water feature near the back fence, up root design, OOB sound level, up placement. It didn't splash, it didn't roar, it just flowed, constantly, calmly, like time passing. She hated it. I could tell because she stood outside, staring at it one afternoon, arms crossed, lips pressed tight, like she was trying to intimidate a fountain into shutting up. Then that didn't work. She tried something else. She started telling neighbor stories. Apparently, I was hostile. Apparently, I was unintentionally provoking her. Funny how none of those claims showed up in writing. Funny how no one else had complaints. Funny how the only consistent record showed her calling police on a guy using his own pool. Her husband started parking on the street instead of the driveway. Small detail, big signal. One night, while I was taking trash out at exactly the approved time, he caught my eye. He looked exhausted. Not angry, not confrontational, just tired. He nodded. I nodded back, nothing said. That was the moment I knew. Then came the cameras. I didn't add new ones. I didn't reposition anything. I simply registered them with the HOA like the rules required and updated the signage. Perfectly legal, perfectly boring, absolute terrifying to someone who lives on accusations. She stopped coming outside when I was around. The police call stopped, but the tension didn't. Weeks passed, then months. I lived my life. Swam at night, hosted friends, maintained my lawn with surgical precision, responded to every HOA email within minutes. I became the model homeowner, the example, and she became the cautionary tale. One afternoon, an HOA board member stopped by. Friendly, casual. He complimented my yard, mentioned how easy it was working with me, then, carefully, He said they'd been dealing with a situation involving repeated complaints that weren't substantiated. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. He thanked me for being patient. Patience is a weapon when you know how to use it. The final crack came quietly. No shouting, no police, no dramatic showdown, just a moving truck parked out front early on a Saturday morning. Boxes, arguments whisper through open windows. Her husband loading things slowly, methodically, like someone who had already made peace with the decision. She never looked at my house. He did, one last nod. Longer this time, then they were gone. I never celebrated, I never bragged. I didn't need to. The victory wasn't about them leaving. It was about never giving her what she wanted. Because the most infuriating thing you can do to someone who wants control is to live well, quietly, and within the rules. And if you're stuck in an HOA with someone like that, remember the story from Story Vault Hub. You don't need to fight, you don't need to yell, you don't need to break rules. Sometimes the best revenge is a hot tub at night on your own property with nothing but silence and a paper trail on your side. The neighborhood didn't talk about it openly after they left, but you could feel the shift. The air felt lighter, quieter, like a background hum had finally been switched off. People smiled more, walked slower, stopped to chat instead of scanning over their shoulders. And me, I kept doing exactly what I'd been doing the whole time. Nothing. That's the part people don't understand. They think revenge has to be loud, dramatic, a big moment where someone gets embarrassed in public or storms off defeated. But real, lasting revenge is boring. It's calm, it's repetitive. It's living so clean inside the rules that anyone trying to come for you ends up tripping over their own complaints. After they moved out, the HOA president sent another general email. This one thanked residents for maintaining community standards and reminded everyone that harassment and misuse of authorities wouldn't be tolerated. Again, no names. But the message landed exactly where it was meant to. I saved it, added to the folder. Because if living in an HOA teaches you anything, it's that documentation is armor. Months went by, summer rolled into fall. I kept using the pool, still at night sometimes. Still quiet, still legal. The sign stayed up, the sign stayed up. The gnome stayed exactly where it was, smiling into the distance like it knew something the rest of us didn't. New neighbors eventually moved into the house. A couple with kids, friendly, normal, they waved first. The husband introduced himself one afternoon and casually mentioned that the previous owners had warned them about strict neighbors and people who watch everything. He laughed when he said it, like he already knew it was nonsense. I laughed too. What I never told him was how close I came, in the early days, to snapping. How tempting it was to confront her, to tell her to mind her own business, to demand she stop calling the police. How easy it would have been to give her the reaction she wanted. But that's the trap. People like her don't care about being right. They care about being central. About turning every situation into proof that they matter, and the second you engage on their level, you validate the whole performance. So I didn't. Instead, I turned her favorite tools against the obsession itself. Rules, reports, paperwork, CAN compliance, smiles that never slipped, emails that never accused, silence where she expected noise, and the system did the rest. That's the part that feels almost poetic. She believed the HOA and the police were weapons she could aim at whoever annoyed her. She never considered that misuse would eventually point back at her, that authority, when invoked without cause, loses patience fast. At Story Vault Hub, this is the kind of story we love telling. Not because someone got humiliated, not because there was a shouting match or a viral confrontation, but because it shows how power actually works in places like this. Quietly, slowly, through patterns and records and credibility. The irony is that if she just left me alone, nothing would happen. I would have been another neighbor, another house, another light on at night, but by choosing me as her project, she built the paper trail that made her impossible to ignore. Every police call that went nowhere, every complaint that came back compliant, every neighbor who rolled their eyes a little harder each time her name came up. By the end, she wasn't enforcing rules. She was explaining herself. And once you're explaining yourself, you've already lost. I still think about that first night sometimes, standing there in a towel, steam rising behind me, explaining to a cop that I wasn't committing a crime by relaxing in my own backyard. At the time, it felt absurd. Now it feels like the opening scene of a long lesson. If you're dealing with someone like this, someone who watches instead of lives, who complains instead of communicates, who needs an enemy to feel important, remember this. You don't need to outsmart them. You don't need to escalate. You don't need to become petty in ways that can be punished. You just need to be consistent, because consistency beats chaos every time. And somewhere out there, there's probably another neighborhood dealing with the same person, the same pattern, the same need for control. If this story ever reaches them through Story Vault Hub, maybe they'll recognize it sooner. Maybe they'll choose calm over confrontation. As for me, the pool lights still come on at night. The water still moves quietly. The hot tub still steams under the stars. And the only thing that ever interrupts the peace now is the sound of wind chimes doing exactly what they're allowed to do. Time has a funny way of sanding down sharp memories until only the lesson remains. By the time winter came around, the whole situation had settled into something I could almost laugh about. Almost. The truth is, living through it rewired how I look at people, power, and these neat little suburban kingdoms we call AH. The new neighbors settled in fast, kids riding bikes, chalk drawings on the driveway, the kind of everyday noise that reminds you a place is alive. No police lights, no whispered complaints, no sense of being watched, just normal. And that's when it hit me how abnormal things had been before. For a long time, I'd been unconsciously bracing myself every time I stepped outside at night, checking my volume, checking my lights, checking the time, not because I was doing anything wrong, but because someone else had decided my existence needed oversight. When that pressure vanished, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for months. I didn't take anything down. That mattered to me. The cameras stayed, the signs stayed, the routines stayed, not as a statement, but as a reminder. I had never lost it. Someone had just tried to convince me otherwise. A few weeks later, I ran into one of the officers who had responded to those early calls. He recognized me instantly, smiled, shook his head and said, "Glad things quieted down over there." There was a weight behind that sentence, like he'd seen the pattern play out more times than he cared to count. That conversation stuck with me, because this wasn't just an HOA story. It wasn't just a neighbor dispute, it was a small, perfect example of how systems meant to protect people get warped when someone mistakes authority for identity. When rules stop being boundaries and start becoming weapons. At Story Vault Hub, we get messages all the time from people in similar situations. Different details, same dynamic. One person appoints themselves judge, jury, and enforcer. Everyone else becomes a suspect. And the moment you resist emotionally, you're cast as the villain. That's why I didn't resist emotionally. Instead, I leaned into something that feels counterintuitive when you're harp. Same routines, same behavior, same calm responses. Over and over again, people like her thrive on escalation. They need movement, reaction, a change in energy they can point to and say, "See, I was right." When you deny them that, they don't know what to do with the silence. Silence makes insecure people loud. There was one last triple I didn't expect. A letter from the HOA months later announcing a review of complaint procedures and new internal guidelines for handling repeat reports. Again, no names. Again, no drama. Just structure, accountability, quiet reform. That was the real ending. Not her moving away, not the police stopping by, not even the neighbors relaxing again. The real ending was the system adjusting because someone abused it too openly, for too long, and I never had to lift a finger. I think about how close I came to doing the opposite, to sending angry emails, to confronting her on the sidewalk, to posting something online in the heat of the moment. All of that would have felt satisfying for about 5 minutes. Then it would have lived forever in screenshots and reports, and he said, she said, narratives. Instead, all that exists now is a folder of timestamps, confirmations, and quiet victories. A record that says I was reasonable when someone else wasn't. That's the kind of thing that ages well. Now when I sit in the hot tub at night, I don't think about revenge. I think about how fragile authority really is when it's built on ego instead of trust. I think about how quickly people review themselves when you stop playing the role they assigned you. And sometimes I smile at how absurd it all was, that someone once believed they could police a grown adult's pool schedule, that they thought flashing lights and official uniforms could turn a personal obsession into a public issue. They were wrong. The ruse didn't protect her. They exposed her. If you're watching this on Story Vault Hub and you're in the middle of something similar, take this as proof that you don't need to be louder than the loudest person in the room. You don't need to be cleverer. You don't need to be cruel. You just need to be steady. Because when you're steady, the cracks show themselves, and once they do, the whole performance collapses under its own weight. I still live here. Same house. Same pool, same lights. Same calm nights. The difference is, now they're just nights again. Not battlegrounds, not stages. Just quiet moments, exactly as they should have been from the start. After a while, the story stopped being something that happened to me and turned into something I carried with me. Not in a heavy way, more like a reminder tucked into the back of my mind, quietly influencing how I move through the world. Especially around people who confuse control with purpose. Spring came back around. Same neighborhood, same sidewalks, same OHA newsletter slipping into mailboxes like clockwork. But the energy was different now. Meetings were shorter, emails were calmer. Comps, when they happened at all, were actually about real issues. Broken lights, landscaping schedules, boring stuff, normal stuff. That's when you know something changed. I started noticing little things I'd missed before, how often neighbors avoided eye contact back then, how conversations used to cut short when certain doors opened, how tension can live in a place without anyone ever naming it. When that pressure disappears, you don't get fireworks. You get relief. And relief shows up quietly. People lingered outside longer. Kids played later. Someone started a walking group. Another neighbor set up a small free library near the sidewalk, officially approved by the laminated rule sheet and a cheerful smile. I contributed a few books. One of them was about conflict resolution. I doubt anyone caught the irony, but I did. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how easily this could have gone the other way. One bad decision. One angry confrontation. One moment of ego. That's all it takes to flip the narrative. Suddenly, I'm not the guy using his pool. I'm the problem neighbor, the aggressive one. The difficult homeowner, that's the part no one tells you. In environments like this, being right isn't enough. Being calm matters more. I got a message once from someone who found Story Vault Hub through a similar video. They said they were in the middle of an HOA nightmare and felt like they were losing their mind, like they were constantly defending themselves against accusations that made no sense. They wanted revenge, loud revenge, public revenge. I understood the feeling immediately, but what I told them was the same thing I learned the hard way. If you give people like that a story, they'll rewrite it until you're the villain. If you give them nothing, they eventually run out of ink. That neighbor of mine didn't lose because I outplayed her. She lost because she exposed herself. All I did was stay out of the way. I never found out where they moved. I never looked her up. I never asked around. Claire didn't require answers. It required distance. And time did the rest. Every now and then, a new resident will complain about something minor. Parking noise. Decorations, it happens. That's life. The difference now is how quickly it gets handled. Calm conversation, clear expectations, no escalation, no theatrics. The system learned, the community learned, and I learned something too. I learned that peace isn't passive. It's intentional. It's choosing restraint when provocation would be easier. It's trusting that patterns speak louder than outbursts. It's understanding that the long game favors the person who doesn't need to win every moment. There's a strange confidence that comes from knowing you can sit in your own space, doing nothing wrong, and let the world spin without you trying to correct it. That confidence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, but once you have it, it's hard to shake. I still get in the pool at night, not every night, just when I feel like it. Sometimes with music, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone. The lights still glow softly. The water still moves, the cameras still blink. Not because I'm afraid, because I don't have to be. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt watched or targeted or unfairly labeled just for existing comfortably in your own space, let this be your reminder. You're allowed to live quietly. You're allowed to enjoy what you own. You're allowed to take up space without apologizing for it. And you don't owe anyone your reaction. That's the part people like her never understand. They think reactions are leverage. They think outrage is power. But the strongest position you can take is refusing to play the role they wrote for you. This has been another story from Story Vault Hub. A reminder that sometimes the cleanest victories don't look like victories at all. They look like peace, like silence, like a calm night under the stars, uninterrupted by flashing lights, or accusations that never had a leg to stand on, and in a world full of noise, that kind of ending is more than enough.